Lakewoods, welcome to Lake Town. Beautiful day. We're going to start with introductions. Yes, sir.
Terry Hoffmeyer, Lake Town Township.
Skip Keeter, Park Township.
Tom Bird, Iowa Road Commission.
Nancy DeBoer, City of Holland.
David Van Genhoven, at large.
Steve Holtheis, Director of the MACC.
Howard Bauman, Port Sheldon Township, and I'd like to introduce our new township clerk, Teresa DeGraff. She was appointed January 1 and will fill the remainder of Kathy Benbor's term, so she's going to help represent us at the MACC. Teresa.
Thank you.
Ken DeWeert, Fillmore Township.
Kevin Kleinstra, City of Zeeland.
Phil Bauman, Ottawa County Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Amanda, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Amanda Price, Senator Makeup's office.
Staff.
Rob Van for the MAC.
Thank you very much. All right. We have a pretty nice agenda. I think only one approval, and the first one would be right there. So we have a motion, or we need a motion for the approval of minutes.
Skip. Support was from Kevin.
Okay. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Public comments. Amanda, anything you want to bring to us? Okay, very good. Okay, Ian Lockwood series. Elisa.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I would like to invite you all to attend an event that we are helping to organize March 12th and 13th. And we're calling it the Ian Lockwood series. Series because there are a number of different events that we have throughout the week. But we would especially like to invite each and every one of you to attend on Tuesday, as well as invite your staff. This is an event that is being tailored specifically to the MACC area. And I did want to let you know a little bit about who Ian Lockwood is. He is a traffic engineer who worked in West Palm Beach, Florida. And he is responsible for transforming West Palm Beach, Florida into, well, I'll show you some photographs before and after. But first of all, I wanted to just let you know that this event, as I said, it is being tailored to the MACC area. And we encourage you all to invite others to attend as well, your staff. This is something that we want to make sure that we have planners, engineers, architects, community foundation, road commission staff, as well as interested citizens, pedestrian, and bicycle advocates as well. So you can see that this really is something that we believe is an important discussion. And I mentioned earlier to Skip and to Tom that my impression of Ian Lockwood is that he's very good at putting topics on the table and really initiating dialogue. So it will be very thought-provoking, and we're hoping that you can all be part of that conversation. So Tuesday is a day specifically that we would like to invite you to because we have a discussion that will be very community-wide, and it's really applicable to anyone, business owners, to the technical person as well. And some of the topics that we'll be talking about, giving you more details on the transformation of West Palm Beach and what was involved in that. And you'll also have the opportunity to really talk about community character, the purpose of streets, and we'll talk a bit about how some of the design concepts that Ian Lockwood has been promoting can really help improve the local economy and retain local talent. Many young professionals in the area are looking for a community that is vibrant, and so this is something that will be a great opportunity for you to see some of the case studies he'll be sharing with us. Tuesday afternoon, we're calling a site design workshop, so it is a bit more technical, but it is not simply limited to community planners. It's also something that we want transportation professionals to attend. We'll be talking about zoning, site design guidelines, street plans. So that is definitely something that we have tailored specifically to our area, and you have the opportunity to have some takeaways that you can bring back to your community that hopefully will help you in your development process. So West Palm Beach, Florida, before Ian Lockwood's work, had a great deal of boarded up buildings, crime, and it was known as they had a serious drug problem as well, that it was just not a place that many people enjoyed visiting on vacation. So this was a photograph taken on M Street in 1987, and I've got a photograph to show you after Ian Lockwood's work in West Palm Beach, Florida. Many of the things that he will be talking to us about will be the function of the roadways, and what ended up happening is just a great interest in the community, an investment in the community, and it just became an area that was far more attractive for people to walk and to leisurely hang out, and you can see just a real contrast in those two photographs. So this is another good illustration of before and after. So Ian is a traffic engineer, but he will talk a great deal about landscaping. And I think that that tie-in is perfect, especially with the work that Kelly and Carolyn have done with green infrastructure in our community. So this is something that we are encouraging everyone to take an interest in and to attend. So, and another element that obviously you've heard from me before is the interest in safety. Last month, the policy board voted to support the state targets for safety, and that's something that we will be monitoring closely in the coming years. So this is another example of how urban design and the design of the roadway as well work together to improve safety as we make it safer for people to walk, bike, cross the street, catch a bus. So this will all be tied into Ian Lockwood's presentations. And I thought this was a good illustration of the what could be. This is an illustration that was prepared by Bill Johnson and Phil Meyer. And this is our 8th Street corridor in Holland Charter Township. It's part of the corridor where we looked at a pop-up bike lane in August, and we set it up for 2 weeks. But this is just an illustration of what could potentially be as you add landscaping and put in center-left turn lanes, potentially adding bike lanes. This is not an approved plan, but it's simply an illustration of what could be. And I think that that's what we'll start to talk about, opportunities to enhance the right-of-way and incorporate multimodal transportation and simply improve what we have currently. Right, so that is all, and I wanted to just ask if there were any questions regarding the workshop and the Ian Lockwood series. Okay, and if you're interested in saving some money if you attend both events, I believe that there's a discount rate if you attend both the morning and the afternoon. So if anyone has any questions about registration, please talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Looks like that would be very informative. Thank you. Carolyn?
All right, so the West Train meetings. Every so often we give you an update on West Train. The group meets about quarterly on average. It adjusts from time to time. And the group meets mainly representatives from Amtrak. We also have some of the people who are in charge of marketing the train that comes through our area. And then we also have, myself, sometimes Elisa. We sit in those meetings, as well as representatives from areas where the train stops along the way. So West Train, our line is called the Pure Marquette that comes through Holland here. And so I want to give you some updates, some kind of fun facts about how we're doing with the train. So for ridership and revenue, ridership on the Pure Marquette line is up 4% in 2017 from last year. So we like anything that's an improvement. And then boardings at the Holland station. So there's a handout on your table. It shows that the boardings for 2017, it's the on and the off movement, was over 36,000 people. And that's over 115,000 from 2016. But I put that on your table, on your place setting, because I know some people are interested, how is that comparative to other train stations in our area or throughout Michigan? So you can kind of see where that lies in Holland versus Grand Rapids or other parts of the state. And then revenue for Michigan overall, so not just on the Pure Marquette line, but overall throughout the different lines in Michigan, which there are 3 main ones. Revenue has been up 11% this past year, so that was good news. On-time performance. So if you take the train, you may care about this if you're heading to Chicago for a fun weekend. So the Chicago to Grand Rapids, so on your way home, for the last 12 months, which is to the right here, this one represents 2017 as their fiscal year, but just over the last 12 months total, the train's on time 86% of the time. And then when we move over to Grand Rapids to Chicago, so the AM movement in the morning to Chicago, 81% of the time it's on time. So some of the top reasons for a train not to be on time, the number one reason is train interference. So when there's another train on the track, they have to wait for it to move to the other part of the track so they can get by. Otherwise operational, and then some track and signal issues. But overwhelmingly, if there's a delay on the line, it's usually just when you have to wait for another train to get out of your way. So one of the wonderful benefits of having the train station in the MACC area, stopping in Holland, is that it's a great access for our community to get around in a different way. And we're really excited to let you know that Amtrak will have 2 special trains coming through during tulip time, both Saturdays, the May 5th and 12th. So on those Saturdays, we'll have a special train completely designated for tulip time. It will be leaving Chicago around 7 a.m. in the morning, and it will be arriving in Holland around 11:30. And then it will depart to go back down to Chicago around 5:40, so it'll be close to 6. So it'll be a nice whole afternoon, about 6 hours, that people can enjoy in Holland. It will also have stops along the way, so it won't just be a thoroughfare. If you live nearby Hammond, St. Joe, or Bangor, you can also take the train into Holland for tulip time. So it's a great way to get other people up here that may not have the vehicle or just would like a new fun way to get up here for the trip. And then it's also just a nice new way to feature the event and reduce the amount of parking, which is always an issue during that time. The price is still being determined. As you see here, this is actually what the brochure is going to look like for the event. And the Visitors Bureau said that once they have those printed, they'll make sure to get them to us. So I should have them at the next policy meeting for you. A fun add-on to the train, they're likely going to have someone in a Dutch costume on that train that day, so they can answer any questions for anyone visiting, especially for the first time. They can tell them about events that are happening and all the logistics of where to go once you're there and in Holland. And then to promote this event, there's going to be a Union Station Pure Michigan Days, and that's going to be in April 3rd and 4th. So again, someone will have their Dutch costume on and will be promoting tulip time and the train. So Amtrak, they were just really excited about this. Everyone was really jazzed. And to add on to this, there's also, 3 out of the 4 weekends in May, there will be a special train. There's also a train one of the other weekends for one of the golf tournaments in Chicago. So it'll be the reverse action, and people are really excited about that. So kind of a new thing that it's hard to sometimes get a special train just for an event. So we'll have 2 of them for the weekends, which is great. And and I also wanted to show you this. I'll pass this around. For anyone who's really into trains, you'll like this. There's a new train that's going to be making its way into the Michigan area. It's already starting to they're making deliveries of these trains to other areas throughout the country, but we'll have a brand new engine, and you'll start seeing these in Michigan in about a year and a half, they think. So, any questions about West Train or the Pure Marquette line? All right, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, Nancy?
I think Roger Victory wore a Dutch costume to Union Station in order to promote this idea.
And they will be doing that again, wearing it.
Yeah, and the Amtrak guy took a picture of him, and so, we complain about those costumes, but they are very effective.
Yes, they're noticeable on a crowd, that's for sure.
Yes, and we've had conversations at the national level with Amtrak a few times, and they are really trying to promote just putting your bike in the train, going to the next city,
Yes.
take your bike off, ride around and not use cars or anything. So the more we can make this successful, the more they're going to be willing to listen to conversations about let's encourage this connection with Chicago more than it is now, and let's get a whole network through the state of promoting vacations with biking, and it's right downtown. You just get right off, and it'd be great for tourism in our region. So tell your friends and neighbors in Chicago to use that thing. So
it's one of my
they'll be
preferred
impressed.
modes of transportation. And with these new engines, it's going to be a series past the engine too, and they will probably likely have bike cars specifically for bicycles. So it won't have to go in, a weird spot in the luggage carry-on. They'll actually have designated spaces for bikes.
I think they're getting friendlier to pets too. So overall, it's a train with a heart. So use it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well done. All right, Steve.
Hello. So it was a few months back when we were over at Kevin's shop. We were talking about the Downtown Holland study. The MACC is participating in this with some federal funding, and then we got partners, financial partners with the City of Holland as well as Hope College. And at that point, we kind of went over the scope of the study and the vision and so forth that we're trying to achieve. And I just wanted to give you a quick update on where we are in the process with this study. Just by way of reminder, we've got our submarine study area here with East Side Russ's on the east, north side going up to Unity Bridge, out on the west end over to Vinralty, and the southern boundary of the study area is 10th Street. So that's the area that we're focusing on. Still a substantial number of intersections within that study area. And what I intend to show with you today, we're at the point in the process where we've started to identify the alternatives that are going to get a little bit more analysis, and I wanted to make you aware of those and hopefully pique your interest. You might come to the open house that we hope to have in April and share your opinions regarding them. So there are 5 of them that I want to share with you today. The first, and all of them you'll notice very quickly, have to do a lot with the conversion of one-way streets to two-ways. So the first one, alternative 1, is the conversion of 7th and 9th from one-way back to two-way, and that would be for their entirety. So here's 7th here, it'd go all the way back, and there's not an arrow there, but it ties back to 8th Street here. So 7th coming back to 8th Street, and on 9th, of course, the city recently converted this section of 9th back to two-way, so this would continue that two-way conversion all the way back to 8th Street. So that's kind of a full conversion of that one-way pair, the east-west one-way pair. The second alternative is to convert that portion of 8th Street from Pine back to College there, back to two-way. So those of you who have some tenure in the community can remember when that used to be the case, and who knows, maybe cruising downtown is going to come back again. So for those of you who go back a little ways, but you're not going to be able to pick up your A&W root beer anymore, which I always appreciated when my brother came back from cruising. I always looked for the A&W root beer he would bring back. So that one's back on the table, looking about opening up 8th Street again to two-way. The third way here is just a portion of 9th Street, and if you've been in downtown Holland over the course of the last several months, you'll know that the block between River and Pine, between 8th and 9th, is being redeveloped by Gina DeCock. And so there's a lot of activity going on down there, and it's going to include things, if you've followed the press, they're going to be putting in a movie theater, and there's going to be a several hundred spot parking deck, and a lot of density is being added to that area, which follows the vision and master plan for the downtown area, which is really calls for making the whole downtown area much more dense and a lot more intensive land use. And this is the first step in that process. So, there's some interest, of course, in being able to provide access to those uses off of 9th Street. So folks coming up 9th can make a left turn, head west in that regard. So this is looking at just adding one block, or converting one block of 9th Street to accommodate those new uses. And this is an example, I'll talk about in a moment, about where we're doing level of service analyses with each of these alternatives. So we load the particular alternatives into the model, and we run the model to see how the intersections function. And I know there's a lot of discussion both with this one as well as the other alternative that converts 9th Street in particular, what's going to happen at 9th and River. So that'll, River, of course, in the evening we talked about last time, significant northbound flow during the evening peak hour. And, we're all waiting to see, what's going to happen with that particular location. Someone decides they want to make a left turn, head west, what that does to operations, particularly in the evening peak. Another option here is the conversion of Pine, essentially from 10th Street all the way back to River Avenue. And this is a good point to just remind everyone that, as we're looking at these alternatives, we may start by modeling this, but we may modify it a bit. If we find that we're running into a lot of operational difficulties, or if it comes back from the public process where they say, well, this gets a little tricky up here to try to start introducing traffic off of Pine into River Avenue, how would that work, and so forth. So, we may look at something where, it's a conversion up to one of these streets, I think that's 3rd there. So, and, get folks back over to River Avenue that way. So when you look at these, this is the alternative that we'll start with, but there can be bits and pieces of these various alternatives as well. Now, of course, the consultants get a little nervous when you start talking about that. They see that as scope creep, and they're saying, hey, that's not what's in our contract. But I think we'll be able to do some flexibility with some of that as well. Likewise, with just that one block conversion on 9th, another one we're looking at is a block conversion on 7th Street as well between River and Pine. And then, of course, I went into quite a bit of detail last time about this study is looking at more than just vehicular traffic. I mean, we're talking a lot about vehicular traffic and those alternatives there, but there is a real emphasis on the part of the study committee to look at all users. So in addition to vehicular traffic, we are looking at how the various alternatives are going to impact the pedestrian as well as the bicyclist. And so this slide is just a reminder that we have that emphasis as well, and these green arrows do talk about where there are either locations where, additional non-motorized could be incorporated into some of the corridors that we're looking at, or could be enhanced. The dotted lines represent where non-motorized has already been installed in some places. And I was very pleased as I was taking a look at this, that, you see non-motorized up at the River Avenue Bridge. The MACC participated in that. You look at the non-motorized that all the way down Pine Avenue. That was a federal aid project, so the MACC participated in that. And you see non-motorized on 9th Street from really River on there. And of course, the MACC participated in that project as well. So certainly this organization has left its fingerprints on helping bring some of the existing non-motorized into downtown Holland already. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, where we're at in the process is we've identified, the steering committee has identified these various alternatives that came about in part through the public input, public input meeting we had. And now we're at this process, we're looking at future volumes. And, that's always kind of interesting to look at in a study area the size that we have here and try to look into the crystal ball and say, well, what's going to happen? And you can start to think about some obvious examples like the current DeYoung power plant site. It's not going to be a power plant anymore. Well, do we say it's going to remain green space? Do we say, well, we think there's going to be 20 luxury condos sitting there? Do we say there's going to be a hotel there in the future? I mean, the planning horizon of this study is going out to 2037. I think you could find an argument for a particular use, each of those uses on that site. And you can go parcel by parcel, and there's like 26 of them in the study area that are either vacant or are likely to be redeveloped over the course of the planning period. So, the group is struggling with this a little bit, and I've had a little experience with that. As going through this process, I pulled open the River Avenue corridor study. We did that back in '96 and had to make projections about volumes, and all I can say is I'm glad my salary wasn't tied to the accuracy of those volumes. Well, it was the mid-'90s, right? It was go-go. We were growing 3% a year. Holland Charter is doing 5 to 6% a year. Took that out 25 years. Well, the volumes are a little lower than what that projection was. So we have to, kind of temper our thinking and keep things in mind as we work on that. And it's a difficult task. But we'll get it done. And once we come to agreement on those volumes, we're going to, again, conduct those level of service analyses. We're going to put in the future traffic, we'll put in the alternatives, and we'll see what it shows us. Once we have that information finalized, we'll take it to the public and to the stakeholders, give them a chance to take a look at it and give us their opinions on it as well. We're looking at kind of mid-April to do that. And then once we receive that input, the steering committee will take those 5 alternatives and winnow it down to 2 or 3 that we'll take a more detailed look at, including the contract we've even got micro simulations contracted for I think 7 locations within that. So we'll continue to narrow that process, and we think we're still on track to have the study wrapped up by June time. So that's where we're at with the study. I wanted to give you a quick update. Any questions regarding where we're at with that? All right, well, stay tuned, and I hope I at least piqued your interest a little bit that you may be interested in coming and talking about and seeing what kind of information comes out from that analysis. Well, another thing that's been in the news a lot, the Trump administration released its long-anticipated infrastructure program that came out a few weeks back. And my intent today is just to give you a very high-level overview of my understanding of where that proposal is. At this point, there are still a lot of details to be worked out, but at least we do have something in writing that we can react to. So there's 4 main components on the funding side of the effort. The largest, and I think the one that's most likely to impact the MACC area, is the first one. It's called the Infrastructure Incentives Program. You'll see $100 billion next to that, and I need to quickly remind you that this is a 10-year plan. So take all those numbers that you're going to see, divide them by 10 is what the intent is. But you'll see that based on the information I have, it's a $190 billion program. So even if they do it evenly over 10 years, I haven't seen anything that this is going to be front-loaded or anything like that. So let's assume there's going to be $19 billion added in annually on the federal side. Just to give you a little comparison, the highway and transit program today at the federal level is about $58 billion. So, adding another $19 billion to it is significant. Now, what we're going to talk about, and you'll notice here in a minute, there are many more eligible uses than the highway and transit program today. But this is still a pretty significant increase in federal funding, and that's the case. But very quickly, when you start looking through the proposal, and the mainstream media picked this up as well, as that a major objective of this program is to attract non-federal investment. And I'll show you here how they've structured that to really encourage that. As I just mentioned, many eligible uses. We talk about, and a lot of the reports have been around roads and bridges and airports and so forth, but drinking water, wastewater, other types of infrastructure beyond transportation are going to be eligible for all the different programs, including this major one, the incentives program. So that's something to keep in mind for local units of government. that it does extend beyond transportation. When you look at the evaluation criteria that they've set up for the various programs, and based on what segment of or use you're pursuing, it'll go to the relevant federal agency. So if you're looking at a road or a bridge or an airport, it's going to go to US DOT, either FAA or Federal Highway or Federal Transit Administration, so forth. But in the evaluation criteria, the weighting that they've given out of 100%, 70% of it is going to be tied to that portion of the project that is non-federal participating. And my understanding in reading through it is that when you do the project scoring, they're going to take that weighted scoring and they're going to apply that percentage to the non-federal portion of the project. So the way I understand this is if you have $1 million project and you say, we're going to put $800 million of non-federal into it, they're going to take that $800 million and apply that weighting factor, and maybe you get, in this particular example, 56 points. The 70% times that 800 million. Whereas the same project, 100 million, that you're requesting 50-50 split on it, they're going to take that 500 million in non-federal, apply that 70%, it's going to score out at 35. You're going to get 35 points for it. So there is a major incentive to put as much non-federal funding into the program as possible. And we can talk just generally at the end, or I can just mention it now. As of course this is going to have to go to Congress for approval, and I don't think it's inappropriate that we be in contact with our federal legislators and say, if indeed this is the intent, then we need to talk about how many strings are going to be attached to it. If the projects that really get funded are going to be, have federal participation of 20 or 25%, then we need to talk about how many of the federal regulations that are imposed on project owners when the funding split is 80% federal, 20% local. We need to talk about, is the federal government going to require prevailing wage? All the paperwork that comes with the current federal aid program. I think there really needs to be, Congress needs to step in and say, okay, if the federal aid portion is going to be a quarter, 20% a quarter of the project, let's make sure the federal regulations are commensurate with that participation level. And that's something where I think Bill and other folks need to talk about it. But the three other components of the program, maybe not quite as applicable to the MACC area, but there's going to be a rural infrastructure program as well at $50 billion. This expands the eligible uses even more. When you start looking at the eligible uses here, you start to see things like broadband and power generation and distribution and things of that nature. Little different administration. This is going to be largely in a block grant fashion going to the states, and it's going to be the states who make the call on the distribution of this funding. I would assume in Michigan that's going to be, what is it called? The Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is what our state ag department is right now. So my thinking is that it's going to go to the governor, it's going to go to the states, be distributed by the states. They are going to keep 20% though at the federal level for performance grants. That to me smells a little bit like congressional designation. There's not a lot of other details about that right now, but it does make it very clear that there's going to be a carve-out or a set-aside for tribes as part of that. Third part is this transformative projects program. This got quite a bit of local mainstream media attention, about $20 billion. This is the big idea types of things that researchers are out. So, the example I saw on this is the solar road, right? Where people are putting solar panels into the roadway, collecting the sunlight, converting that to energy, and then wirelessly sending it back to vehicles who use that power, battery-operated vehicles. So as they're traveling down the road, the vehicle is being powered by the roadway. So the Dutch and the Finns, or the Swedes, they've been on this for a while, and we're talking about that. So that's kind of one example. But, the bigger types of ideas for transportation in the future, depending on where you are in that process, if it's just, a gleam in someone's eye, it's going to get maybe 30%. If you've got it to project kind of level status, you might get 50% of your costs, and if you're ready to put it into beta testing on the capital side, that's, I think, where the federal government really wants to place their emphasis. You get most of your funding if you've got an idea that's to capital construction already. And then, of course, no federal stimulus program would be complete without some support for existing financing programs. So this would be adding a little funding to existing federal credit programs that are out there today as well as, of course, being able to use private activity bonds and get the tax benefits of that as well. That all attracts some private investment. So just a couple other things that I read through the rest of it that to just point out for all of us, who use the interstate system. I think there's going to be a loosening of rules in terms of allowing states to toll on interstates. But I think the one that potentially, as I read it, could really impact us is there is discussion in there about mending regulations, and it's actually the two major components of the Federal Code of Regulations, Title 23 and Title 49, which is highways and transit and so forth. And in there was talk about allowing more flexibility on the application of federal requirements on projects where funding is primarily non-federal. So when I read that, I immediately thought of Ottawa County's recent project on James Street, which got, I think it's about a $1.2 million job. I think it got $375,000 state funding, something of that nature. And is moving forward with that. It doesn't have to be bid through the federal process. But if this came to be where, I'm just speculating, if federal regulations were lessened such that in a scenario I was talking about before, where the federal portion of a project might be 25% or 33%, could the regulations be modified so that a project receiving that small amount of federal aid doesn't have prevailing wage, doesn't have the same level of testing, doesn't have all the other requirements that go with federal funding. So let's just say that would be put into play. I mean, the MACC, I would think, would want to consider a very different way in how we distribute federal aid. That we look at projects and we tend to have always taken the tact of, well, if you're going to encumber a project with federal aid, let's get it as close to 80% as we can because you're adding all that additional cost. Well, if new rules combine, projects that are 30 or 40% federal aid supported, maybe we spread that federal aid out to more projects that don't get encumbered with it. So again, that's just, as I read that, I was thinking of the James Street job and I thought, hey, there may be a whole different way. We'll see what comes out of that and what kind of loosening of regulations do occur. And then the last couple items there, again, the popular press really picked up on this, shortening the federal permitting process is usually for really large projects. This is kind of stuff that MDOT would work on. So the finding of no significant impact, that's what the FONSI is, or the ROD is the record of decision. These are federal steps in the process to get big projects like M231 done. And Steve, I'm glad you're here because I want to say, so right now the new says it's going to, federal agencies are only going to have 21 months to get a FONSI or a record of decision. Do you remember what 231 took? It took longer than 21 months. That I can remember. So I can't recall exactly. So this would be a pretty significant streamlining, just based on the one project that I really had direct involvement with in terms of shortening that process.
M231 was unique too because we had to shrink the project from, we used the draft environmental impact statement for the whole, from 196 all the way up to 96. So we had all that information, and that took a long time. And then when we decided we didn't have the funding in the early 2000s, it was on hold, and then we came back with a reduced project, which only went from 96 to M45. So then we had to start over, but that took, in and of itself, even though we had all that information for that, we still had to redo it for those three segments, Holland, Grand Haven, and then the new That took about 3 years, if I remember right, off the top of my head. I'd have to look.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a long process, and it'd be nice if they could, in a lot of cases, shrink it down and decrease that timeline. But what exactly that would entail, or how that would, because there'd have to be things that we would do differently in order to meet that. Or there'd be less things the feds would have to require in order for us to meet that reduced timeline. But I'm sure we'd find a way, because once we have projects, we like to get them done. So
any questions regarding the proposal? You know, people tell me, well, when do you think, you know, the funding might start rolling? And, you know, I look into my crystal ball and I'd say, oh, I don't know, about a month or so before the elections. Probably, I would guess about August, September, they'll roll this program out. Just a guess, just a guess.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
You said a big part of it was they want more public or private
Right.
investments in it.
Yep.
Maybe we should talk to our legislators to get, right now, Michigan, they don't have any legislation that is favorable to public-private partnerships, not like they do down south. So we should talk to our legislators to look into that. That would make it more, it would make it easier for the private people to invest into the things like that.
Yep, that may definitely be something to consider. And I didn't get into the other 30% that make up the rest of the evaluation criteria, but one is, has your state taken steps to improve the pool, increase the pool of revenue for infrastructure? So, and I think it's going to be a 3-year look-back period. So Michigan and what the legislature did a few years back, the way I understand the program, we'll get some points for that. When the state legislature did, you know, increase the gas tax, so that's good as well. And then they're also looking for, there's going to be a little waiting for what locals and states do to streamline their permitting process. So that's going to be, I think, another 10% of that. So.
Steve, welcome.
Thanks.
Any further comments from MDOT?
nothing substantial. I think that, you know, as you probably have seen, one of the things we're doing is like reacting to the additional rainfall, and how that's accelerated potholes and everything else, which is an example both on local and state roads of, you know, how the additional funding is needed. We're still playing catch up in a lot of ways. All that funding, you know, it was for this increased state revenue was coming to us in 17, 18, 19. So we're still not, you know, at the full capacity of that package, and we're trying to do the best we can to fix what's out there. But it's a challenge, and I think that, you know, that's the one thing with you know, acts of nature, that's just going to exacerbate the problem, and that's what we're running into a little bit. So, but I think that our maintenance crews have been out there and doing the best they can. In some cases, last week, I know they would go out and fill a pothole, and they'd have to come back the next day because it wouldn't stay because of the rain, and so there are challenges out there. So that's we're still addressing them, and we're going to use the additional funding stream to address those. But you know, we're running into some challenges, I guess I'd say. So I just want to clarify that. Other than that, in the area, Steve talked about the non-motorized aspects. We continue to, that whole thing is evolving in terms of us as a department, how we're involved, partnerships and everything else. Right now, it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. We're working as the project manager for the constructing of the White Pine Trail extension. I think most people are familiar with White Pine. It's the state park trail. There was some funding to extend the trail up north, I believe from Reed City to Cadillac or something. And there was first talk about doing it with limestone. Friends of the Trail didn't like that idea, So we went back and reconfigured and are doing some of it with pavement now. But we're building the trail. That's a new role for us. For a long time, a lot of people would say within the department, I guess people who had been with the department a long time would say that we're not in the trail business. And we really do not have a template of funding to fund trails, but as things continue to evolve, and this is a good example of how this goes, we may be constructing trails or doing that in partnership with people. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out, but in the future, as this trail network evolves and everything else, MDOT may get more involved, or they may not. I know that's a typical bureaucratic answer, but that's all I got right now. So, but anyway, it's going to be an interesting pilot. So that's all I have for the kids.
Questions?
Hey, Steve, that section of Ford Freeway between Zeeland and Sagatuck, is that going south? Is that scheduled to be rebuilt soon, or? I know they did the northbound, and I thought it was scheduled, or maybe Steve knows that question.
21 is the last, and MDOT's project. It's just outside of the current tip.
Okay.
21.
That's something that, well, I don't want to say Steve personally, but he's communicated that message that that if that project could be moved forward, the MACC would like to see that, and we've taken that
Into
consideration. I mean, there are a lot of needs out there, but if there's a chance or an opportunity, and we've been known to do that before, move projects back and forward based on how things go. So
it'd be a perfect farewell.
Somewhere.
I'll work on that.
And the department, of course, they have a lot of balls in the air when they're doing a major project like that. So they're trying to get some culvert work lined up. They're trying to get bridge work lined up, and all those pieces have to come together. So when you start saying, oh, let's move this project up a year, well, we got culvert work, we got bridge work. There's a lot of other factors that come into it. It's not so easy just to, even if the money's there, sometimes other pieces of it just,
Right. That's why sometimes we've obligated money in a fiscal year, late in a fiscal year, and then did the construction in the following year, because it took us long enough to get to a point through design and all the utility work to actually get the thing out the door. So.
I've driven around quite a bit in the last couple of months. They have relatives in other places, and it's this time of year. Boy, it's pretty rough. With the funding, do you think, is the state going to get up to a level that I would call satisfactory?
There's more politicians in this room that probably have a better take on that than I would, because it's political pressure that it's going to take. I mean, it's the policymakers that are going to have to, at some point, I think, bite the bullet and say, what are we looking for in transportation? This increase in revenue starts that, but does not fill the need that we've studied and we've projected, and not only us, but other agencies throughout the state that are involved in the transportation industry. So, will it ever get there? It's really a political question, and the policymakers have to make that commitment. Whether they will or not, I don't know. I understand the pressures they're under. I guess the bottom line, my answer to your question is I really don't know.
There was the answer.
But I'm encouraged. I mean, the state legislature is looking at an extra bump out of the general fund.
Yeah.
I don't believe the Senate has acted on that yet. I think the House has acted on it. So, I mean, that's encouraging. If that happens for the next several years as well, that can help move the needle too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of variables out there, and I guess that's what I was trying to get to, is that, we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Well, just on that same note, is the continued pressure on the legislature to take the money out of the general fund and put it into roads, which was part of that deal a few years ago. But I had a quick question for you about the federal package.
Mm-hmm.
Is that typical, a restraint on the amount of federal money coming from a new bill like that? Is it 30, 40%, or is it typically higher than that?
So I've been a part of 2 other fairly significant federal stimulus programs, and in both of those, Congress just made the decision, we're going to put it in the formula that exists today for the distribution of federal aid to the states, all the same rules, all, the same distribution allocation, the same rules, and they just did it that way. Of course, it was very clean in that regard. Everyone knew exactly what. So this is a different tact in terms of, looking at some different rules for the distribution of this fund. So
It seems like trying to incent the locals, states to be more a part of what the feds are trying to do too.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see if, for instance, the funding has to be used on the federal aid network. Or are they going to allow, it doesn't have to be federal aid, but has to be a regionally significant road. I mean, we have, not every regionally significant road is on the federal aid, most of them. So, a lot of details like that weren't in the proposal.
Okay, Kelly, you're up. Rob, you're on deck. So.
All right, so I have just a couple of grant proposals that we've been working on recently that I wanted to share with you. We're not asking for any action to be taken today. So the first grant has been submitted, a full grant proposal was submitted to the 5-Star and Urban Waters Restoration Program, which is through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we're calling this project the Lake Macatawa Litter Prevention. So we're working in close partnership with the Holland Hope College Sustainability Institute on this project. They actually brought the idea to us, and we've had Carolyn and I had some meetings with Michelle Gibbs, their director, and in the development of this project. Because it's been noticed by us as we participate in community events, and also in talking to people and hearing citizens bring up concern with litter, and in particular at Collin Park. So that was kind of the start of this. We've had some complaints about there's not enough trash cans at Collin Park, and so then we've kind of expanded that, looking at, well, we've got a bunch of other waterfront parks that are used, and do we have enough facilities there to prevent litter? So we started looking at some of the different types of elements, not just trash cans, but fishing line recycling. We have a lot of popular fishing spots at our parks, and there aren't proper receptacles for fishing line recycling, and they're very simple, pretty inexpensive to make. So that's one element that we'd like to add. Other things that we noticed during our river cleanup events that is very annoying every single time is cigarette butts. They're everywhere. We're not going to prevent them from being there unless there's the proper receptacle. So putting those little cigarette butt receptacles in key areas in parks, again, where we know there's high usage. The doggy bag stations, the City of Holland has quite a few of those in parks, but not enough. And then, again, specifically at Collin Park, just the additional trash cans, the commingled bins. So along with this would be a public education program too, to help people understand why these things are important, and the fact that those bins at Collin Park, the ones that the city uses, are commingled. So whatever you put in there will be sorted for as far as recycling goes. So it's for everything. There's not signage on those. There's limitations on signage that can be put in the city. So we want to do a big public education push, especially at Collin Park, because there's so many events that draw large crowds of people there. And then with those major events, also investing in some portable recycling stations, again, to raise that awareness of what is recyclable, what's compostable, what has to go in the trash, and hopefully encouraging people to take those actions back home. We know the City of Holland in particular has a low participation in recycling, so hopefully that would be an outcome of this. We could increase personal recycling habits, but also making sure that those events are handled properly. So we would likely look at adding our participation in events that we typically don't, like the Holland Concert Series, the 4th of July fireworks, but relying heavily on volunteers to help man those recycling stations so that people know how to use them, that recyclables go where they're supposed to and trash goes where it's supposed to, because left alone, people don't read signs. So that's kind of what we're planning to do. We certainly do have all of the parks on board. So City of Holland Parks, Holland Charter Township, and then Ottawa County. And so we're looking at some of the county parks that are on the river proper. So Adams Street Landing and Paw Paw Park. Again, primarily focusing there on the fishing line recycling, because those are popular spots for fishing line. And then again at the Holland Charter Township Parks too, the fishing line recycling at Dutton Park and Hawthorne Pond, in which Holland Charter Township, the facilities or recreation director, I forget his title, but he's already bought the parts and made the fishing line recycling bins before we even got the grant. So that's fabulous. We don't have to pay for those. And ideally, there are some of these things that we can implement without having the funding. The funding certainly is going to help, cover staff time and some of those equipment expenses. So we'll still implement some of these things without the grant, but hopefully we are, the grant is competitive. We did come up with over 100% match on this project. So just over $25,000 on the grant, a little over $27,000 on the match, and a lot of that relying on our partners that are going to help do the installation and maintenance of all of these, plus community volunteers. So like the Ottawa County Parks, they have park stewards that will do that work at the two county parks. We will find out like in July about this funding. So we proposed an August start date. Starting in August is not ideal with our kind of community event and public education season starting in May with tulip time really. But we are able to take this out 16 or 18 months. So we will have a full summer next year if we were to get it funded. Yeah, so that's the basics of that. Any questions about this project?
Thank you, Kelly.
So the second proposal, at this point, this one was just a pre-proposal. We submitted a pre-proposal to the Sustain Our Great Lakes program, which is also through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It's a different grant, different scale, different priorities. And so this one has a funding category for green stormwater infrastructure. So that's what we propose to do. Based on our green stormwater visioning process, we had some conceptual designs developed by Kaiser and Associates. So we're going to take a couple of those and submit those for funding here. So one in particular at Holland City Hall, we have preliminary buy-in from the Parks Director from Andy Kenyon, and this would be essentially converting all of the parking lot islands in City Hall to rain gardens or bioretention systems. And again, Andy was very supportive of that. We'd still have to go through a process to get full city support on that project. But and then also working with Holland Christian Schools. Kaiser and Associates is still finalizing the concept for them, but I had a cost estimate and kind of the numbers that I needed for the grant. But we're looking at, again, bioretention, some pretty extensive rain gardens on their site to capture stormwater from the buildings, the parking lots, and then plus they have some flooding issues in the lawn areas where they tend to get lawnmowers stuck. So they were very interested in how do they avoid that. Plus, Holland Christian is starting to work with the Outdoor Discovery Center on nature-rich curriculum. They're interested in starting a nature-rich preschool. So doing this green infrastructure elements will help to enhance that at their facility. Using native plants will encourage some habitat for wildlife, and they can use these stormwater features as outdoor classrooms as well. So they were very supportive of moving forward with this idea, and I guess that's why we chose to work with them, because they were on board immediately to move forward with this. And because of the timing, we had concepts developed for some Zeeland public schools, for Holland public schools. We just didn't have time to have the conversations with them to get them on board like we did with Holland Christian, because it was actually a pretty easy conversation. So with this, we've got the city, the school, also the Ottawa County Water Resource Commissioner's Office as a partner on this, and then Project Clarity to bring in some funding for match. And because this would be a pretty significant project. So just over $500,000 is what we asked for, just over $220,000 in match. And this one, the more match you have, the better. You are competitive. We're required to have 25%. I think that's about 30%. So at least we did a little bit better than the minimum requirement. This one, timing is going to be very similar to the other project. We should find out by August if we get the full grant, but I guess before that even. March 9th, since we submitted a pre-proposal, full proposals will be invited by March 19, so we'll have to wait a few more weeks to know whether we're invited to submit a full proposal. If we are, that full proposal would be due April 24, and then we'd find out in August if we receive the funding. And so because of this timeline, that's why we didn't want to ask for any action to be taken at this time. Once we find out whether we're invited to do the full proposal and we get that submitted, we'll bring that back to policy and ask for action to be taken on both proposals at the same time. So that's kind of the timeline and the basics of that project. So any questions about this one? No? Okay.
Kelly, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, I wanted to give just a brief update on the Project Clarity lunch. This was a lunch that was held at Zeeland Farm Service on February 14. It was put on by the Outdoor Discovery Center with Project Clarity, with whom we partner and do quite a bit of work in the ag community with. So we had record attendance this year, 78 attendees. We had folks from local ag retailers, conservation districts, handful. Some NRCS, USDA folks, and then a number of farmers from our area, and also some that were from a ways away. So we had good attendance. Glenn's not here today, but he was there also. I was gonna ask him some of his thoughts on how he thought it went. Keynote speaker was David Brandt. David is this gentleman here. He is a farmer from Carroll, Ohio, just south of Columbus. David farms just a little over 1,200 acres. He's a no-tiller, plants extensive cover crops. He promotes the use of a multi-species cover crop. And when we say cover crops, what we see here, and you've probably seen some pictures I've shown, we get a nice 18-inch stand of turnips or ryegrass, and we think we've got a pretty good cover crop. Well, Dave is planting cover crops that are anywhere from 4 to 8 feet tall. He estimates when he rolls the cover crop in preparation for planting, they have around 22,000 pounds of biomass per acre in that cover crop. So when he has all this biomass, it's adding anywhere from 0.75% to 1% of organic matter into his soil every year. And that's one of the big things that Dave pushes, multi-species cover crops. And he also, on the multi thing here, he promotes diversity within his operation. So he's not just a corn bean farmer, he's farming, doing some pumpkins. He's expanded into cover crop seed. And then Dave has been known for his daikon radishes, and he'll sell these radishes just out of the field to people who want to come and buy them. So kind of a different way of thinking. I think we need to keep in mind here that Ohio is a little bit different than Michigan. Dave tends to plant his cover crops early. They interseed directly into the corn. Usually when the corn's thigh high, waist high is when they plant their cover crops. We have some guys in this area that are doing it. It's kind of a hard sell. we've had really good feedback from some of our local guys. I got a chance to talk to a few last week. It's generated some interest in cover crops. Did get to meet with one last week who I think we're pretty hopeful. You know, it generated the interest, and we found out that some of his fields weren't in the watershed, but he does have a few that are in. So I think we can get some more people signed up out of this. But yeah, it was a great event, and we'll do it again next year. I don't know who we're going to bring in as a speaker. We've thrown some ideas around. But are there any questions?
Nancy?
That's a great idea, bringing in somebody and bringing everybody together like that. That is so key.
You know, in the past, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but in the past they've brought in, you know, extension, people from the MSU extension, they brought in academics, and it didn't go over real well. And Dave is a farmer, so he relates really well.
Yeah, that is so smart. Bringing them from another state, it's a whole different line of thinking, and, you know, that really launches all the other things you want to talk about, because you have a reason to get together. So, and Valentine's Day, that's a great kind of stuff.
Maybe next year we'll promote it as a couples event.
Rob, what do you think? What do you think made it better? Just the outside speaker, you think, or are you connecting better with local farmers?
Well, it's a mixture of both. Yeah, Dave is certainly a draw. He's pretty well known within this kind of no-till cover crop, this community of no-tillers, and also, you know, things that Project Clarity are doing and the work that I've been doing. It's starting to pick up. The momentum is gaining. It's picking up steam.
I sense you're a big part of that. So
well,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Stephen.
Yep, item number 5 there, West Michigan Prosperity Alliance. I'm just happy to announce that, of course, the MACC has been part of the West Michigan Prosperity Alliance from day one. I sit on the executive committee of that group, and we, again, the Prosperity Alliance, again, was awarded a funding from the state, $180,000 to continue its activities. I think the board is still committed to taking the majority of that funding and putting it into projects that the board feels promote regional prosperity. So, you know, certainly stay tuned to that. And if you think you have a project, you know, typically that board is looking for multi-county projects, looking at things. Our organization, and Kelly in particular, has been very involved with the West Michigan Watershed Collaborative, and that effort has received several rounds of funding from the Alliance, and we certainly want to continue with that as well. And of course, some of that funding has been helpful in supporting staff efforts and covering some staff costs as well. So good to see that continuing. Of course, a lot of questions. That was a Governor Snyder program, so there are a lot of questions as to whether it'll continue under his successor. But we have it for another year.
Okay. Financial report?
Yeah, including your agenda packet was the monthly financial statement through January. So that's a third of our fiscal year. Revenues are sitting at 47.2%. Expenses at 28.1%. Be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the financial statement.
Okay. All right. Executive committee?
Yeah, the executive committee did meet, and a summary of that meeting is in your packet as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding that report.
Terry. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for all of you showing up here. Welcome again to Laketown Township. Just a very brief thing. We're working on a couple of things. We have about 300 acres of parks in Laketown Township. Our smallest one is our Lake Michigan Beach. And we have had grant approval not to expand the beach property, but on the back side of the dunes, expand some property for additional parking and hopefully a small picnic area. We're presently negotiating with property owners, and we should be moving ahead. One of the things that we have coming up very shortly in about 3 weeks, I'm not sure how many townships do annual meetings, but Laketown Township historically does an annual meeting. We bring in the chairpersons of all of our boards and commissions and any of the entities that receive millage money, library, aquatic center, and we asked them to give a report to 40, 50, 60 people that normally show up for that, and then after that we do adopt the budget. So we go along, and that's really what's happening right now. A quick side note, I should have talked when the Amtrak people were up there. Amtrak is just a fine, fine event. One of the things that we're finding, if you enjoy symphony, Holland Symphony is great, Grand Rapids Symphony is superb, and if you like Chicago Symphony, they actually do afternoon concerts. That Amtrak train leaves in the morning, you can have a quick lunch, you can attend a fantastic performance of the Chicago Symphony, have a leisurely dinner, hop back on that train and come on back to Holland all in one day rather than staying overnight. Last fall we did an Amtrak short trip out west from Seattle down to Portland, but in September of this year, we're going to be taking a river cruise that starts in St. Louis. So we're taking the Amtrak from Holland down to St. Louis. It'll end in Memphis, and we're going to fly back, coming back from Memphis. But it is amazing how well Amtrak can connect with whatever you're going to do. The river cruise we're taking is a 50s, 60s remembrance cruise, ending in Memphis, so I may have to go visit Elvis again. But it's a fantastic opportunity. Everybody should participate with Amtrak. And if you don't like Amtrak because they're kind of on a fixed schedule, take the little, what is it, the electric. We pick it up just south of Michigan City, and unbelievably convenient in terms of the number of times, you don't have to wait until 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. If you want to leave at 4, fine. Train leaves about every half hour anyway, so you're in great shape.
South Shore, right?
South Shore, yes, yes. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. All right, member comments, other members.
Wednesday morning, they're going to have a meeting at Holland Chamber about the interchange by Business Loop in Zeeland hooking up to Ford Freeway. So, if you would like to hear what they're planning for that, you could come down to the chamber and find out.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Any other members? Everybody good, Nancy? Big week for you?
Yes, big week for us, big week for the MACC too.
Yeah.
Congratulate Steve on his new position and appreciate all that he has done here for the region. Not an easy task. You've done it well and with grace. And so we will miss Steve in his leadership for this region, but we appreciate his staying in the area and helping with Holland Charter Township. And yes, Holland is having a vote on Wednesday for our new city manager.
Yeah, very good.
2 candidates, yes. We are excited about being at this place at this time.
Okay, we're going to talk about transition in a minute. Amanda, thank you for being here. Teresa, welcome. Hope you enjoyed it. Yes. All right. Steve, you're going to be here next month, right?
Yes, indeed. You're not
So
getting rid of me that
we're not
easy.
saying goodbye quite yet, right?
That's right. I'm around next month.
All right, talk a little bit about transition, and so go ahead.
Yep, so certainly, kind of the timeline that I've been working with the executive committee on, given the advancement and the things that have transpired over the course of the last month or so. My intent is to be with the organization through the remainder of this month and through March as well. But certainly we need to be about ensuring that there's going to be a smooth leadership transition here at the MACC. And to that end, certainly working with the executive committee on those the matters to make sure that to ensure that we have that smooth transition. And to that end, it would be very helpful to me if we could have a special meeting. Probably, I'm looking at March 8 or 9. To come together, take care of some of those transition details, I've also received some direction to tie up a couple of loose ends, particularly around the bylaws. We're right at the goal line, but we got a couple things to take care of with that as well. And so I'm hoping to use that special session to take care of some of those loose ends as well. So how we'll proceed with this is Carolyn will send out a scheduling poll to all of you and give you some dates or times on those 2 dates. And hopefully we can get a majority of you available to sit down. We'll try to be as expedient as possible, but your extra attention to that will be very helpful to me to ensure a smooth transition. So that poll will be coming out here in the next day or two. And if you could respond to that promptly, we'll get that set up and get it noticed and as we need to do and so forth. So,
Steve, what on that next meeting, will that be voting on kind of the transition process, sort of the details?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we'll all try and make that. We'll say goodbye later on, not today. So let's all try and be here for the next month so we can say farewell in an appropriate way. I want to say thank you because I knew this has been going on. I said, Steve, worry about one job at a time, and you did. So I appreciate that. And you know, mark of a leader is you bring in good people. And so I have every confidence that as you leave, we have really good, appropriate staff. So thank you for that as well. So
yeah, great team here. So I'm very comfortable in that it'll be a very smooth transition.
All right. Do we need to take a motion, or we just can stay we're adjourned?
I think you just stand up. That's the only motion you need.